Awesome. And so, like I said, we're going to section 43, which is technically closer to the beginning of the curriculum for Mod 6, but it kind of makes sense to kind of keep it close to section 48, which is the continuation of natural language processing. So, and then so we'll talk about different models and stuff for current neural networks, LSTMs. I don't think, Jenny, I think you went through section 48 already. Do you know if hidden Markov models are in there by chance?
I don't think they're in there.
Okay, we might talk about that next time too then.
Okay.
So that's a really common thing in, what's it called, for natural language processing. So we'll have a whole bunch of fun then. Okay, so let me go ahead and share my screen again. And now you guys saw behind the scenes earlier. I saw like why my window, like why I have to have it in a certain way so I can see you guys' face and see if you guys look confused or not. All right, so, okay. Let's get rid of that. Okay, so natural language processing. So this is also abbreviated as NLP. You'll hear people say NLP all the time. First things first is that NLP is like a really, natural language processing. It's a really like big field right now, or has been. It's been evolving constantly. I will say is that not every data scientist will use NLP. I do think, I personally, and I think another instructor I was talking to, Raphael, believes that every data science team should have some familiarity with NLP just because it's such a useful skill to have, at least the basics, so you can actually do something with that data. If you have, you know, some kind of text data, some kind of language-based data set, it's nice to be able to understand how to process that and use that in a useful way. It tends to be, NLP tends to be a little more niche, but I think that's becoming a little more blurred now, where there definitely are strict, you know, natural language processors, researchers, and, you know, data scientists focusing on that area. But I see it more and more common where a general data scientist, you know, would also have to have or at least some familiarity with NLP. So, which makes sense. I think it's a useful term.
Jenny, I will say, so I was talking to my friend who's been a data scientist for like 10 years, and I had him look at my resume, and I had NLP like there, but not like super highlighted. And he was telling me to move things around, and he's like, and how well do you know this? I was like, not that well. We're just kind of starting to learn it. Or how comfortable. He's like, no, you know this very well because companies really like it. So like put it on there and be like NLP and neural networks, like make sure that's there. So I think it's like a big ticket item, like Victor was saying.
Good. Yeah, I'm organizing my capstone around NLP and neural networks. So
me too.
Oh, yay. Oh my gosh, if we pick the same data set again.
Oh, that would be great if you guys pick the same one again. Just by pure chance.
We'll start our own company where we'll just sell whatever it is that's in the data set. Yeah.
I mean, if you guys do, like, obviously this is joking around, but if you guys would do that, that'd be like the perfect Flatiron story. Like, you guys would be like it's like poster child of data science, you know, online and everything. But no, yeah, NLP, like Lauren was saying, like from, you know, her data science friend, it's a big deal. If you can show, you know knowledge for NLP, you are a very valuable asset because, to be honest, like computer scientists tend not to, where most data scientists are coming from, don't really focus on that kind of part. This is where actually a lot of linguists are actually taking that role of, you know, NLP data scientists and stuff like that because they just are familiar with like those concepts and stuff. So it's a really useful tool to have. And same thing for neural networks. Obviously, you know, you guys are kind of starting off in the field, but the more you kind of show that like experience you have, people get really excited about that because they're like, oh, cool. Like you are familiar with this. We don't have to like reteach you all the basics, essentially. You know, we can kind of talk about this different stuff. For the record, you know, not every data scientist needs to have those things like as like direct skills, but it definitely stands out. It's because it's, you know, it's hot right now, like, you know, neural networks in particular, but also natural language processing. So good skill to have and explore this. But cool. All right, so some basics then for NLP, kind of like saying what NLP is. Basically, you can think of like natural language is kind of like the opposite of something called structured language. So structured languages are things like programming, mathematics, logic, things that have very strict rules. And if the rules are not followed, it's not correct. It doesn't make any sense. So like example of this, like mathematics is a very structured language. If I put like 3 equals, that means nothing. Like there isn't enough kind of like understanding in there. If I put 3 equals 2, like this by itself is kind of like, what exactly does that mean in mathematics? Like, am I setting this to something? Like the language has very strict rules on like what is allowed and what's not allowed. And then from those strict rules, you can actually do things like proofs and say, well, let's say, 3 equals x plus 2. Well, this then will imply that x is equal to, 1. So like those are very strict rules that are kind of followed from through. Natural languages have a lot more fluidity. So like basically you can have a lot more complexity. It's unstructured. There are, I should say when it's unstructured, it's not that there isn't structure in natural language, it's that there's a lot more ambiguity and a lot more flexibility in what you can say and do, which makes NLP really interesting, but also like really difficult too, is that we'll see the challenges of like some of those things that just come up with the fact that like language is ambiguous and sometimes it depends on context and how do you teach a computer context, like if you think about this. So we'll talk about some examples of this. But the idea here is that computers will like bridge that gap between processing words and phrases. So things that are very like defined objects, and then parsing sentences, and then more advanced techniques. Like for example, when some sentence is written down, what is the tone? What is the sentiment? Sentiment meaning kind of like, is it a positive feel? Is it a negative feel? Are they angry, sad? Those kind of things. Sentiment analysis, another big one. You'll see that a lot in job descriptions is like, oh, we do a lot of sentiment analysis. So think of like a review of someone leaves behind. It's good to know, like, is that a positive review or negative review? Sometimes stars or thumbs up, thumbs down just isn't enough detail by itself. So sometimes it's nice to be able to read comments through a sentiment analysis tool and say, oh, this is a positive comment and this is how we can adjust or flag this thing so we can look deeper into it. As well as document and group clustering. So this is kind of interesting. It's kind of like saying like what kind of document this is. So identifying, like I'm going to say document, just a group of text. There's also a part in NLP that is really big right now. Have you guys heard of GP2 by chance? So this is like text generation. So GP2, let's see if I can just kind of pull it up quick. GP2, OpenAI. So OpenAI is a research group, and they released, let's see if I can find it real quick. It's probably the best one. Basically, okay, this is from November. So they released their whole thing. Basically, GP2 is a way to generate text based on like kind of having like a seed. Like you start off with a couple sentences or words, and GP2 will fill out the rest of the information. So actually generating, like something that sounds like convincing. So it's kind of cool is that you can, there's some examples of this where they start off with saying something. I think there's a famous one that's like in the paper that's, it's like unicorns were discovered in this area, and basically the GP2 filled it out like a scientific report, kind of like a scientific article. There's another one where you can start putting like start saying like a cake recipe as if you're about to start a cake recipe, and it'll fill out, the ingredients and stuff and instructions on how to make a cake recipe. So this was trained on a large corpus of, it looks like 8 million web pages. So basically it gathered a lot of information just from the internet, and basically from the internet, just observing how language and like what that looks like in there, took that information and is now able to do text generation. There's some really interesting things that people can do with this. One thing kind of controversial about this paper or this model is that they didn't release like if you look at this first part right here, this was February, 2019. So earlier this year in February. The full model wasn't released for the public to people try out. So OpenAI kind of it's open, right? Lets everyone see it, not until November. So the idea here is that they were actually concerned about the ethical questions of like, if you have a machine learning tool model that can generate a lot of text very quickly, how can that be used, in unethical ways or, dangers of this part. So the idea, at least the reason they gave for like, it's kind of a little controversial in the sense like, did they use it just for PR and stuff like this? But anyway, there are things like, can you generate, fake articles, for example. One that I heard that's actually probably more convincing is making spam bots, essentially. Is that if you want to basically fake someone being like a Facebook user or something like that, if you can generate this information that makes it look, real, that makes it look like a real person talking, then, you know, you basically effectively disguised yourself, you know, amongst, you know, the moderator, like the bot moderators are trying to find spam users and stuff like this. So this is actually a huge, like, you know, ongoing like area of saying, you know, how do you identify bots basically writing stuff? And then also how do you make things that are good at writing things, for think like chat bots, for example. Like if you have a little message kind of going back and forth, you know, it's actually really useful to have something that can interact back and forth. So there's a whole bunch of applications for natural language.
Do you guys watch Silicon Valley?
Oh yeah.
Oh, well, so Jenny, there's that one episode where he's like Guilford is actually like a fake Guilford, and he's talking back and forth through the texting. And is that similar to this?
Yeah, I think I would say that's pretty similar. So Silicon Valley, yeah, I think they just had their season finale just like last week. But yeah, he writes, like you were explaining, Lauren, he writes a Slack bot, right? Like it's supposed to be like, or maybe it wasn't even Slack. It was just some like a
Guilford robot, and so his friend would like be messaging him, and it automatically would go back to him, but it wasn't really him typing it. It was just like a robot typing it, but he could speak in the way that like he would, like how he would respond. He trained the model to basically just be him, so he doesn't have to message his friend.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. Basically, it's like it's a chatbot, but specific to this character speech patterns and like basically like all text, but like basically emulating what he would write. Which there's a whole bunch of like ethical questions on that case. It's like, oh, like, you know, for example, if you write a whole lot, will someone be able to take that information and write like you, kind of deal, when your responses? Or I've even heard some cases. This is almost like, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Black Mirror. There's a whole bunch of technology stuff we can go into, but there's the concept of taking someone who maybe has passed away and kind of recreating like, you know, something similar to like them, kind of deal. There have been kind of some interesting like ways people have done this. There's actually been, if you look this up, you can probably find it. He used more like not NLP, but a little bit of like AI of saying, if they ask this question, respond in this way. But having that automatically done by learning from a corpus of something that you've put together. And note that that's not just text, that could also be speaking and stuff like that too. So recorded voice, and actually reproducing either in text form or even speech synthesis. So kind of like think of like Siri, Google Assistant, Amazon Echoes, those kind of things where they're saying maybe novel sentences that haven't been directly programmed in there, but they can actually say these. And it's what sounds like a natural tone too. Because there's actually, I mean, if you go, we can go really deep into language, right? But there's so much more than just text itself, like upspeak, for example, in like English, and then also translate into other languages too. Like different languages have different ways of inflection and phrasing. One that interests me in particular is American Sign Language, because it's not like English. It's got a very different kind of syntax. But like those kind of things can all be tied into natural language processing. So again, it's a huge evolving field that I think, like Lauren was saying, like if you can talk about NLP, even the basics, people get really excited about that, because this is an evolving field that's just going to keep evolving.